right, good afternoon. Such a nice voice. Hi, you can change the accent. It'd be nice to have a Kiwi accent. Or maybe a Hebrew accent. Right. Anyway, let's do a praise to Manjushri. Obeisance to my guru and protector Manjushri, who holds his heart to scriptural texts embodied of his things or things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with a patient love of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, whose strong and thunder proclamation of the Dharma arises from their stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews our suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. And Trichu Manjushu's princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushu, loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosed in my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so I may gain insight into the words, the Buddha's words, and the texts that explain them. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly. And the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings may attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings may attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings may attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Right. So today we delve into some of the verses. We haven't covered a lot of distance today. We only covered 4 verses, which is quite nice when you think of covering a topic that should be more simple, less complicated. So it's still nice to have like a moderate pace. Now, I wanted to do a couple of things for this session. I wanted to speak about dedication in general, because I feel that the verses can be quite straightforward. And with some of them, I think that there's a lot of need for extensive explanation. So I wanted to just look in a general sense at the practice of dedicating and how we can turn this practice into either a meditation session on its own, or of course to add it to other meditation sessions and tweak some things about a dedication to make it become more powerful. Of course, we want to cover all our bases to make sure that we dedicate with the right intention and not just kind of half-heartedly. But on top of that, there are, I think, ways to make sure that our dedication gains momentum. So that's what I wanted to do for the first part of our discussion today. So first off, I wanted to start with the benefits of dedication. So I think that altogether, when I looked at the text, I picked up at least 3 benefits for dedicate. So it's good to, I think, at least create a list so that we're quite sure about, so that we know why we dedicate, so that we'll be more inclined to dedicate and also to do it in the right way. It could be that there are other benefits for dedicating, and we can probably update the list as we go. So first off, the first purpose or benefit for dedicating is, as we discussed today and yesterday, it is safeguarding our roots of virtue. So we said before that one moment of anger can cause the destruction of roots of virtues that have been accumulated over thousands of eons. And as Chucky pointed out today in the morning session, there is a discussion about who's the person who is getting angry and who are we getting angry at. So it is said that, for example, when a higher bodhisattva is getting angry at a lower bodhisattva, 100 eons of accumulation of virtue is destroyed. Whereas when a bodhisattva, a lower bodhisattva, is getting angry at a bodhisattva, a high bodhisattva, and I think that in the text they're called bodhisattvas that have got a prediction and those that haven't got a prediction. Anyway, when the lower bodhisattva is getting angry at a higher bodhisattva, then they need to wear an armor for as many eons that commensurate with the moments that they've gotten angry with, which means that when a lower bodhisattva is getting angry at another bodhisattva, then there's a greater amount of roots of virtue that is being destroyed, and therefore they have to wear the armor of patience for a longer time. So then I think that as a result of this discussion, we of course think that when we get angry with others, when we get angry with, for example, bodhisattvas, the amount of virtue that will be destroyed is greater. I think that, as I said before, I can remember occasions in which I was quite irritated with my teacher. I mean, I wasn't like, I wasn't going on like full on rage. It wasn't out going on a rampage, but there were moments in which I felt a bit irritated with him, a bit or a lot. So, yeah, it said that those moments destroy roots of virtue, unfortunately. So I had a discussion during the lunch break with Geshe Jamyang. I wanted to clarify a few points. So it said that, first of all, the text is very clear that as for the roots of virtue that are being destroyed, there are only roots of virtues which are classified as accumulation of merit, which means that they belong to the accumulation of merit. And once you create those roots of virtue that belong to the accumulation of wisdom, they are safeguarded anyway. They're not destroyed by anger and so forth. So the roots of virtue that are created that belong to the accumulation of merit are those which were created through generosity and ethics and patience and joyous effort. And of course, many other things that we do, going for refuge and developing faith, loving kindness and so forth. All of these belong to the accumulation of merit. So anger destroys them. So it is said that dedication safeguards them so that they're not destroyed. Now, in my discussion during lunch break with Geshe Jamyang, which was a little bit similar to what I did with Geshe Tsultrim, I tried to assess whether there is a valid reason, a logical reason that will explain why is it that they are safeguarded. So, for example, suppose that now we are motivated by bodhicitta, we give donation, charity to a group of beggars. We have done the action. At the end of the action, if we dedicate the virtue of an action that was motivated by bodhicitta, right? So if you dedicate it for the sake of complete enlightenment, it cannot be destroyed by anger. Whereas if we don't dedicate that root of virtue, it is destroyed by anger. So in terms of the action, it's the action of generosity. In terms of the motivation for the action, it's bodhicitta. But that's not enough in itself to protect that root of virtue. We also need to dedicate it for the sake of complete enlightenment. So my question is why? Why does it work like that? So since I wasn't able to get like a valid, not a valid reason, a reason that would explain it in a logical way, why would that happen? So we have scriptural references for that. Like, for example, the one that is found in Getz Dhammarincha's commentary, and the one that Geshe mentioned, just as a drop in the ocean will not become exhausted so long as the ocean does not dry up, so will our roots of virtue dedicated for complete enlightenment. So we have a scriptural source for that. So that's one thing. Another thing, Geshe Jamyang used to say before that maybe the following example or analogy can work. So you might have accumulated some money at home, money or possessions, jewels or what have you. You might keep them at home, but there is always a danger that they will be taken away by someone else, a burglar or a thief or what have you. If you dedicate them for complete enlightenment, it's like putting them in a safe in a bank. So it is better protected. So again, it's an analogy, but it doesn't give a logical explanation why would that happen. So I think that will have to suffice with that. So what do we get out of this discussion? First of all, that there is a benefit in dedicating our roots of virtue because it protects them from being destroyed. That's the first point. Second one is that it protects them from being destroyed by anger and also wrong views. And it protects roots of virtues that belong to the accumulation of merit. So that's the first benefit of dedication. The second benefit of dedication is that it is using roots of virtue that we have accumulated before, and it turns them into causes for enlightenment. So actually, it's interesting because you can say that, I think that you can say that we can take up a certain practice. So just perform a virtuous action motivated by bodhicitta, thinking that now I'm going to study Shantideva's texts in order to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So we are creating causes for enlightenment. But I can just as well say that I want to study Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life to become a better person. So that's a motivation that is slightly different. And still, it seems that if I have this other motivation in order to become a better person, in order to accumulate merit, in order to accumulate virtue and so forth, if I have those motivations and then still at the end, I make sure that I dedicate those roots of virtue for the sake of complete enlightenment, it seems that that dedication has some ability to turn these roots of virtues to causes that will contribute to the state of enlightenment. So it's of course important to make sure that a motivation at the beginning is the right motivation, bodhicitta motivation. But it seems that even if we have neglected that at the beginning, it's not that for us it's the end of story. There's still something that we can do that will play, it seems, a certain role in turning those roots of virtue towards complete enlightenment. So that's the second benefit. So we can also think of all the other positive things that we've done in the past. So any act of generosity, helping someone in the supermarket, being nice to another person, we can think of all those roots of virtue and dedicate them for complete enlightenment. So in that sense, it's like honing all of them and directing them towards enlightenment. So that's the second benefit. The third benefit is increasing our roots, the roots of virtue that we have already created. So when we dedicate our roots of virtue for the sake of complete enlightenment, we're dedicating them for the sake of attaining the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, which means that the end goal for us is enlightenment, but the causal motivation for enlightenment is compassion for the sake of all sentient beings. So suppose that we dedicate the virtue of study this manual for the sake of enlightenment, for the sake of all sentient beings, which means that we think that the study of this material is done for the sake of Georgie, for the sake of Cherky, for the sake of Eva, for the sake of Jane, for the sake of Jason, for the sake of Kate, for the sake of Ollie, and so forth, for the sake of each and every person around us, and for the sake of all living beings that extend to the reaches of space. So commensurate with a great number of beings that we include in our dedication prayer, we are dedicating a certain root of virtue, so it magnifies it. Right? From a single action of just studying this manual, it becomes something that we share with all living beings, countless living beings. So that's one reason for increasing it. The second reason for increasing it has to do with the duration. So when we dedicate it for the sake of attaining the state of enlightenment, for the sake of all sentient beings, if it takes us 3 great countless eons, we ensure that the results of the the results of the virtue that we have created will still go so long as we haven't attained the state of Buddhahood. And even for that, if we think that for the sake of all sentient beings, then even after attaining the state of Buddhahood, we will still continue to benefit sentient beings. So from the point of view of the duration of benefiting sentient beings, a virtue will become much stronger. So that's another reason for increasing our roots of virtue. Also, from the point of view of the goal, the end goal, I think that, as we said before, there's nothing higher, nothing better than attaining the state of enlightenment. There's no higher state. So we might now have done just a simple virtue. We've spoken nicely to another person. We have made them feel comfortable. So you can say that in great scheme of things, it didn't require a lot of work. It was quite easy, might have occurred naturally, but still dedicating even that for the sake of complete enlightenment is making a simple action become great, something that contributes to the state of enlightenment. So that's the third benefit, increasing our virtue, right? So increasing it in terms of commensurate with the number of beings, with the duration, and with respect to the goal. Any questions or comments before we continue? Yeah. All right, so Georgia is asking, she's looking at the FMT prayer book, and in the dedication section, I think that was composed by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It says that by the merit created by me and sorry? Yeah, due to the past, present, future merit collected by me, or that belong to the three times. So the three times are actually just the past, present, and future. The question is, what's the goal with the three times? Yeah, collected, yeah, created in the past, the one that I'm creating at the present, and the one that I will create in the future. And that brings me to the next thing that I wanted to discuss, which is the manner of dedication. So we can tweak our way of saying the dedication or meditating on the dedication so that it will become so much greater. Ollie, have you got a question?
Oh, yeah, I did actually, Kat, and I was just typing it in. Look, I thought of one more reason as well. I was thinking from a historical perspective, dedication distinguishes us from a Hinayana practitioner and therefore reinforces our commitment to the Mahayana. So that, you know, that throws a little bit of history into it, perhaps also.
It's a good point that you make with respect to the commitment, because this is another thing that I wanted to mention with respect to tweaking our tweaking the way that we dedicate, so that we make sure that we combine so many aspects into our dedication, including a commitment that will make also the dedication be more heartfelt and more powerful. So it's a good point that you're making. Thank you. So with respect to the manner of dedication, first of all, here we're looking at Shantideva's dedication chapter, and as it says in the first verse, let's put it on the screen. But whatever virtue there is, due to my having composed, engaging in the deeds of the Bodhisattva. So Shantideva is here is using the virtue that he has created in order to, in composing this text. So as Geshe said yesterday, obviously it's not that we have composed this text, but we can still think of what Shantideva did and edit or combine it with all the virtues that we have done. So we can dedicate the virtue of studying this manual, reading this manual, doing a particular thing, or we can dedicate the virtue that we have accumulated after each meditation practice that we do, at the end of every teaching sessions that we listen to, that we teach ourselves, at the end of the day, before we go to sleep, when we think of all the positive things that we have done throughout the day, if we are practicing the 5 powers every day, and the last power among the 5 is the power of aspiration or dedication, then we can, if we allow ourselves to take the time to think of all those different aspects that make the dedication powerful, the more the better. I think that Lama Zopa Rinpoche is probably a champion in doing such dedication. So, first of all, one aspect to add into our dedication is to do that with being mindful of the emptiness of the 3 spheres. We discussed that yesterday. So you can dedicate your virtue with that, or you can dedicate the virtue without that. And I think that, as Geshe-la said today, if you want to ensure that definitely your roots of virtue will act towards complete enlightenment, then you need to combine it with being mindful of the emptiness of the 3 spheres. Of course, if you don't do that, if you just say that, for example, I'm practicing generosity, I'm now giving away donation of food to those that need. I'm teaching the Dhamma to others. I'm protecting others from fear. You can dedicate those actions for the sake of enlightenment without being mindful of the emptiness of the 3 spheres. And those actions will contribute to the state of enlightenment. But the road to enlightenment is great. It takes a lot of time and there are many steps. If you want to make sure that you're taking the steps that will be significant steps that will definitely, in a very powerful way, lead you to the state of enlightenment, they need to be combined with being mindful of the emptiness of the 3 spheres, because in this way we combine both method and wisdom, and only it depends upon combining both method and wisdom would be able to attain the state of enlightenment. So that's one thing that we can add into our dedication. Now, the second thing that Khenpo Kumpel says in his commentary is to dedicate it like, to think that we are dedicating it like Arya beings. So in page 395 in his commentary, it says, when one is dedicating virtue or merit and making prayers of aspiration, one should do so in a way that is consonant with that of noble beings or Arya beings who have seen the truth and whose discipline is utterly pure. It has been said, however, that failure to make one's own dedication and prayer of aspiration, leaving it for others to do, is a mistake. For one must be aware of the virtue to be dedicated and must dedicate it continuously. So we sometimes ask for prayers to be done for us, right? So if something happens, if someone gets sick, if someone dies and so forth, we sometimes ask for names to be passed on to the Geshe or to this Lama and so forth, or to be put on our dedication list and so forth. And it's good. We're in some sense facilitating more people praying for a certain person, which means that they're creating more, you can say from their side, they're creating more virtue in relation to a particular individual. But if we do that and we don't do our own dedication, then as Khenpo Kumpel says here, it's not good enough, right? So it is a mistake to leave a dedication for someone else to be done and not to do it ourselves. So that's one point. But the point before that is that we should dedicate a virtue in a way that is consonant with Arya beings who have seen the truth and whose discipline is utterly pure. So how do we actually make an aspiration that is consonant with Arya beings, with a perceptual realization of emptiness and whose discipline is pure? How do we do that? Fake it till you make it. Yeah, fake it till you make it. I think that fake it till you make it, I think that probably in Arya beings that have perceptually realized emptiness, so we should at least make sure that our dedication is combined with mindfulness of the emptiness of the 3 spheres. So that's one way of faking it till we're making it. At least Even if we haven't seen emptiness perceptually, directly, then at least be aware of the emptiness of the three spheres. Even if we haven't realized emptiness, just telling ourselves, I'm the one that does not exist from its own side. I'm dedicating it for the sake of others who do not exist for the sake of from the on side, so that I attain the state of enlightenment that does not exist from its own side, and so forth. It's quite mouthful, right? It can be quite long, but we're faking the way that Arya beings making their dedications with a perceptual realization, with having attained a perceptual realization of emptiness. So that's one thing. And they also have discipline that is utterly pure. Discipline that is utterly pure, I think that probably here in this context is, maybe we can think that, and I'm dedicating in a way that I will make sure that I will never harm other living beings. So I will abstain from harming others. I will also then, as much as I can, I will protect the vows and commitment that I have in order to allow myself on that basis to quickly attain the state of enlightenment for the sake of others. Any other ideas that you might have, or things that you think that are good to add? All right. So that's the second thing that I wanted that we can add into our dedication. So to do it with being mindful of emptiness, to think that we're doing it just like Arya beings. And one of the verses that we sometimes recite is just like in a way that the Bhagavan Buddhas and others like Manjushri and Samantabhadra did. So, right, so we think of just like the protector Manjushri and Samantra did, so will I dedicate my roots of virtue for the sake of others. So we can also think of these verses, or think about these verses in terms of dedicating in the way that Samantabhadra, Manjushri and others have done. So that's one thing to add to our dedication. Then the third thing to add to our dedication is to include roots of virtues that were created by me, but also roots of virtue that were created by others. So here Shantideva in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, he says at the first verse, again, but whatever virtue there is due to my having composed engaging in the deeds of a Bodhisattva. So we can think that we are sharing Shantideva's deeds in composing this text because we are studying it and also putting it into practice. So we think that I'm dedicating my virtue, but also I dedicate the virtue of others. I dedicate all the virtue of all the people that were involved together with us in studying this material together. And also the people like Geshe Tsultrim and all the staff members of the centers that have made it possible for us to study this material. All the sponsors of the centers, all the people that have contributed in work or in kind for that, in a way that allows us to study this material. So including virtue that was created by me and others. And as Georgie asked, we can also think of virtues of the three times created by me in the past, at the present, and in the future by myself and others. All of this is something that will also add into the magnificence of our roots of virtue. So Khenpo Kumpen says with respect to that in page 396, in the past, Shantideva dedicated all positive actions, past, present, and future, related to the Bodhisattva conduct in a way that was free of the concepts of the three spheres. Sorry, actually, I should go to the paragraph before. Regarding the agent of dedication, originally this was Shantideva. Now it is ourselves. So as to what is dedicated, it is all the virtue. First of Shantideva's intention to implement the Bodhisattva practices, followed by his actual development of Bodhichitta and the virtuous practice itself, namely his training in the six perfections. As for ourselves, we dedicate the virtue that has resulted from engaging in the conduct of the Bodhisattvas by means of any of the 10 activities of Dharma, such as composition, the making of offerings, and the distribution of alms. So we dedicate our virtue, the virtue of Shantideva, but also that includes all the actions that result from studying this material, practicing this material, and so forth. So then it says, in the past, Shantideva dedicated all positive actions, past, present, and future, related to the Bodhisattva conduct in a way that was free of the concepts of the three spheres, right? Emptiness of the three spheres. But although as a result, he dedicated even the virtuous actions performed by ourselves, it is nevertheless said that we, for our part, should dedicate our own virtue, mingling it with his, just as we might mix a drop of water with a great ocean. In brief, we should gather together all the virtue accumulated in the three times, both by ourselves and others, and considering that it is represented by the merit of our present striving in the way of bodhisattvas, we should dedicate it, right? So if we think that someone like Shantideva has already dedicated our virtue, or the Geshes in this organization, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, is known as the Dalai Lama, is doing dedication on our behalf when we study this material, so we do not really need to do it. So here, Khenpo Kumbha says that let's mingle our virtue with the virtue of those great teachers. Together with it will become very powerful. So that's the third thing that I thought is good to be mindful of with respect to dedication, combining both a virtue and the virtue of others in the past, present, and future. Now, the fourth one that I wanted to mention is to do it with certain attitudes in mind. And Khenpo Kumbha in his commentary mentions 4 branches to that. So to do it with aspiration, with heartfelt longing, with commitment. So this is the point that you made, Holly, and with prayer. So when we make such dedication, the first element is with aspiration. So for example, Khenpo Kumbha says, the aspiration is the wish. May all beings adopt the conduct of the Bodhisattvas, virtues in the beginning, middle, and end. May they be happy. Let there be no fighting or quarreling amongst them. So I think that similarly, when we think of the verses that we've covered today and the ones that we will cover later on, so however many sick people there are suffering in body and mind in all directions, due to the merit, due to my merit, may they obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. So this is the aspiration. May they obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. May all sick people, however many sick people there are in suffering in body and mind, may they obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. That's the aspect of aspiration. Then we need to have a heartfelt longing that comes up with that. So Khenpo Kumbha says, heartfelt longing makes us cry. How wonderful if beings were happy, right? So not only say that however many sick people or pitiable people there are suffering in body, in mind, in all directions, may they obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. To let that really touch our mind or touch our heart, to have that strong longing that may that come to pass. So that's the second thing to that we can add into dedication. Then the third aspect is the aspect of commitment. So the commitment or the resolution is I myself will bring them to happiness. So although here Shantideva doesn't state it like that, it says, however, it says, due to my merit, may they obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. So I think that we can read the dedication like that, but we can also think, I will make them obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. So we are dedicating, but we are also kind of adding an oomph into that. Well, so George is saying that that's difficult because it brings up not the ego saying that I will do that. Well, we can think about it as like, if we think about it together with love and compassion, then we are adding to that great compassion with things that not only may they be free from suffering, but with great compassion, I will make them become free from suffering. So it's not necessarily kind of this pride or haughty kind of attitude. If we do it with kind of really heartfelt longing, may they be free from suffering, and then add to that the wholehearted resolve, the highest intention, I will make them become free from suffering. It is adding a commitment to that. The commitment, as Oli pointed out, that is consonant with the Mahayana. And then the prayer is the supplication, may the Lama and the three jewels bless me, that I be able to accomplish this task. So we add to that also this request made the Lamas, the objects of refuge, the meditational deities, Dhamma protectors, or what have you. May my root teacher and all the other teachers that I receive teachings from, may they bless me, and that may they give me inspiration to be able to make other sentient beings obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. So it's not necessarily, so as I said, it's not what Shantideva says here verbally, but I think that if we take what he says as a basis and then we'll make sure that it becomes a magnificent, powerful dedication prayer, if we had all those different aspects, aspiration, wishing them to obtain an ocean of happiness and joy, with heartfelt meaning to that, how wonderful if that come to pass. To add to that also the highest intention, I will make that happen. And also to ask the lamas and the yidams to bless us to be able to do so. It would be quite a massive dedication. So it's quite similar to the way that we meditate on the four immeasurables. So when we meditate on the four immeasurables, we say, oh, Chucky is Chucky has just pointed it out. Four attitudes is the four immeasurable. No, actually, that's very good, Chucky, because that's exactly what I had in mind. So, it's almost like saying great minds think alike, but I'm not that great mind. So maybe simple mind think alike. Although I guess that it's like an offhanded insult to Chucky. Anyway, I'm a simple-minded person, Chucky. You're great. Anyway, so yeah, just like the four immeasurables, how wonderful may all sentient beings have happiness in its causes. How wonderful they would have happiness in its causes. I will make them have happiness in its causes. Please, Guru Deity, bless me to be able to do so. So exactly the same structure. So that's another wonderful thing, I think, to add into all the dedication prayers that we do in whatever way we can. I mean, maybe there are some that will not wake up that well, but still with most of them, I think that it will work. So that's those are more aspects that we can add to our dedication. And since we mentioned loving kindness with this heartfelt longing that we add into our dedication, and also with a type of commitment, I will do it by myself. Kempo Kumpans also had a comment about doing it with loving kindness and compassion. So it says at the bottom of page, actually in the middle of page, no, actually at the top of page 398, it says, therefore, it is said that the most important thing here is to apply the practice of loving kindness and compassion in the case of all the topics mentioned in this chapter on dedication, whether or not such an attitude and its referent are specifically evoked. So here Kempo Kumpa says that although Shantideva not speak about it directly, he hasn't pointed out directly, not only in the dedication chapter, but you can also think of other practices that we do and other dedication prayers that we do, even if it is not spelled out explicitly. The most important thing here is to apply the practice of loving kindness and compassion. So meditation on loving kindness is more excellent in its effect than even the act of making offerings to all the Buddhas. Moreover, it brings forth the 8 qualities of love, as we find exemplified in the story of the ancient king Maitreya. Blah, 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 blah. Then it says, through meditation on compassion, the authentic profound view will manifest in the mind, just as it did in the case of the teacher Gamarakshita. In addition, all negative actions which hinder the rising in the mind of the perfect view and other qualities will be purified, and one will behold one's yidam deity, just as the Sangha did, which means that the bottom line is that if you do those dedications with a strong, intense loving kindness and compassion, it will add into our dedication in terms of accumulating virtue, purifying negativities, purifying obstacles and obscurations to virtue. We'll come to see our, and therefore we'll come to see our meditational deities face to face and so forth. In short, it will boost up the accumulations and also a purification of negativities and obscurations. Then at the bottom of the page, he says, if one meditates alternately, if one meditates alternately, this is how I would say that, on loving kindness and compassion, they mutually remove the obstacles peculiar to each. For by meditating on love, the mind can become excessively exhilarated, whereas by meditating on compassion, it is possible for the mind to become downcast and despairing. It is said that the meditation on loving kindness and compassion can, in the best case, preserve all the world's inhabitants from harm. Then, to a less exalted degree, one can, with such meditation, protect the people of one's homeland. This is excellent if we can at least protect those around us. Finally, at the very least, one is able to protect oneself from harm and aggression. So those are the things in general that I thought of adding into our dedication. Actually, now that I think about it, I made some comments about it in my study notes, the turn notes. Right, so the manner of dedicating, we can combine it or not combine it with observing the emptiness of the three spheres, dedicate them purely like Aryas, dedicate the roots of virtue created both by myself and others. Let's add to that in the past, present, and future. Then we also dedicate them in combination with aspiration, heartfelt longing, commitment, and prayer. And then with loving kindness towards beings, loving kindness and compassion. So this is kind of a general, I thought of giving a general overview of dedication, how we can boost it up. I'm wondering if you have any comments or any questions, any suggestions. Yeah, sorry? In chapter number 1 of this text, we had a description of the qualities of bodhicitta, and also kind of this, not only the qualities of bodhicitta, there were also some preliminary practices such as thinking of death and impermanence and the precious human rebirth and so forth. But I think that in terms of the positive motivation, chapter number 1 kind of is gearing us up to developing bodhicitta in terms of mentioning the great qualities of bodhicitta. So I remember that maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I did somewhere a weekend retreat that was only based on dedication, making dedication and aspirations. So doing a few sessions every day and just kind of thinking of all those positive things and dedicating it for the sake of others, which is an excellent way of, I thought that it was a powerful way of meditating on loving kindness, as this section says. So we spoke of the practice of exchanging self with others and also practicing tonglen, in which we give away a happiness and the cause of happiness, our body, possessions and roots of virtue for the sake of others. So I think that also within that practice, we can include when we give away our roots of virtue for the sake of others, then we can include some of the aspects that we spoke of now belonging to the dedication. To think of the roots of virtue created by me in the past, present, and future, created by others in the past, present, and future. To seal them with a view of emptiness and to give them away like that to others, to then make sure that we include those 4 branches of dedication, to have the aspiration, the heartfelt longing, to have that commitment, also to seek, to supplicate the gurus, the idams, the 3 jewels and so forth, so that we will be able to be of benefit to others. So we can also add that to the practice of giving and taking and so forth. All right, that's about dedication. There was just one more point that I wanted to make with respect to the verses that we've covered today in class. So we've covered verses 2, 3, and 4. So verse 2, however many sick people, or as Geshe-la recommended according to his honest commentary, you can think of people in a pitiful situation, or sentient beings in a downcast situation, impoverished situation, worn down situation, however many people, sentient beings there are, suffering in body and mind in all directions, due to my merit may they obtain an ocean of happiness and joy. So Khenpo Kumben in his commentary says that here you can think of those who are suffering from suffering of suffering, the first step of suffering. So whoever might be suffering from physical suffering or mental pain, may they obtain an ocean of happiness, but may they be free from the first step of suffering. Now in the next verse, number 3, for as long as they remain in cyclic existence, may the happiness never decline. May migrating beings obtain an uninterrupted flow of unsurpassable happiness. So here we think of, may they be free of suffering of change. So we wish them to have, for the happiness to never decline, which means that we wish them to be free from suffering of change. So suffering of change is explained in scripture to be contaminated happiness. So that it is a type of happiness or pleasure, but it stays away, it stays for just a short duration. At some point, it either goes away or it transforms into something that is dissatisfactory, at the very least, so painful in some situations. So here, when we wish living beings, for as long as they remain in cyclic existence, may the happiness never decline. But what we're actually wishing them is to be free from suffering of change. May the happiness never decline. May it not be just a simple samsaric happiness. May they enjoy actually long-lasting happiness. But is that possible in cyclic existence, you might wonder? It says, for as long as they remain in cyclic existence, may the happiness never decline. Is it possible to remain in cyclic existence with happiness that never declines? I think that probably you could say, what do you think? It depends if they have the aspiration to increase their happiness. Yeah, to study Dharma to generate pure happiness. What do you reckon, people at home? Is it possible to be in samsara with happiness that never declines?
Typically, no, but the Taoists certainly made a good attempt with their the I Ching and their Book of Changes and so forth. So they certainly tried to incorporate change into their day-to-day living, unlike the rest of society. But no would be my answer.
Yeah, I think that, you know, so iPhone is saying, I don't know who iPhone is, but they're saying no, but they. Yes, I agree with both of you. That it seems to me that so long as we are in samsara under the control of karma and afflictions, it is not possible to have long-lasting happiness that never changes. And I think, and also as Georgie says, our goal is to create the causes for pure happiness, the one that is not in samsara, but the one that will be in nirvana. So it's still, I think, it is still a nice aspiration to make. May their happiness, samsara never declines, but samsaric suffering is just like that. It does decline. There are those that are free from samsara, free from karma and afflictions, like bodhisattvas on the pure ground. They can take rebirth in samsara for the sake of other living beings, or appear in samsara for the sake of all beings. So you can say that they're in samsara, but they're not of samsara. But still, this verse is not actually referring to those Arya bodhisattvas abiding on the pure grounds. I think that is referring to just living beings in general. So we wish them, for as long as they remain in cyclic existence, may the happiness never decline, although it's unrealistic. But it's still a nice wishing. May migrating beings obtain an uninterrupted flow of unsurpassable happiness that is afforded by the state of nirvana, the state of liberation. So together, so on top of that, we can also then wish sentient beings in relation to verse 3 to be free from the third type of suffering, which is pervasive suffering of conditionality, which means that if beings are free from the sets of aggregates that we have obtained because of the control of karma and afflictions, if only beings are free from the control of karma and afflictions, they can enjoy an uninterrupted flow of happiness. So for as long as they remain in cyclic existence, may they be free from suffering of change. May they obtain an uninterrupted flow of unsurpassable happiness in the state of nirvana, in which they are free from pervasive suffering of conditionality. All right. Sorry? So suffering of change is second type of suffering, but also we can add to that the third type of suffering, pervasive suffering of conditionality. So for as long as they remain in cyclic existence, may the happiness never decline, in the sense that may they not experience suffering of change. May migrating beings obtain an uninterrupted flow of unsurpassable happiness, in which they're free from pervasive suffering of conditionality. I'm not sure that kind of it needs to necessarily be strictly applied in the way that I explained it to suffering of change and pervasive suffering of conditionality, but that's one way of thinking about it. So I ran out of things to say. I am wondering if you have any questions or comments. All right, so we're going to have an early mark. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's do the dedication prayer. So we can pause just for a minute in thinking of the things that we've covered at least today. So when we say those dedications, then try to think about it in terms of including the emptiness of the three spheres, right? So due to this virtue that doesn't exist from its own side, may I, that does not exist from my own side, quickly become a Guru Buddha that does not exist from its own side. So think about it as we do those dedication prayers. Think about it in terms of not only the virtue that we've created, but also the virtue that others have created in the past, present, and future. And also think about it in terms of not only may quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigrated beings, think that I by myself will attend the state of the Buddha, will by myself lead all transmigrated beings without exception to that state, and still seek the blessings of Shantideva, the Buddha, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and all our gurus to be able to do so. And the same thing can be applied to all the other verses that we're going to recite. So Due to this virtue, might quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigrated beings without exception to that state. May the precious supreme Bodhichitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chinrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Here it's a bit awkward, because it's a bit awkward in thinking that how is it that I by myself will cause His Holiness the Dalai Lama, powerful Chinrezig Tenzin Gyatso, to remain until samsara ends? Anyway, can be creative about it. So the last one is, you uphold the subduer's moral way, who serves on the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent praise, honoring the three jewels, protector of myself and others, your disciples. Please, please live long. Thank you. Have a lovely weekend.